A sudden brush against his coat, a tug, gone. His wallet. Rain poured like punishment from the heavens, drenching the city's glass towers in streaks of silver. Richard Hale, the man whose name opened boardrooms and crushed competitors, stormed down the sidewalk, phone pressed his ear, voice sharp with power. But then it happened. He turned sharply. A small figure darted into the crowd. A young black girl, no more than 12, soaked to the skin, her eyes wide with terror. "Hey! Stop!" he shouted, his voice echoing across the busy street. She ran faster. Richard gave chase. His Italian leather shoes splashed through puddles. His tailored suit clung to him like regret. The city blurred around him, horns blaring, people yelling, but all he saw was her. That face, that fear, that audacity. When she ducked into a narrow alley, he followed, his breath ragged, his fury raw. But what he saw at the end of that alley stopped him cold. The girl crouched beside a tiny boy, barely 6, shivering and pale. She held his face in her hands, whispering, "Just hold on, Malik, just hold on. We'll eat tonight, I promise." Richard froze. In her trembling fingers was his wallet, opened, but instead of money, she was holding a photograph. His photograph, the one of him with his late wife. He stepped closer. Why are you looking at that?" he asked, voice low. The girl flinched, startled. "I'm sorry," she said. "You look kind, like my dad." Before Richard could speak, a police siren wailed nearby. Someone must have reported the chase. The girl's eyes widened in panic. She grabbed the boy's hand and bolted toward a chain-link fence. "Wait!" Richard shouted, but she was already gone, vanished into the storm. He stood there, drenched and shaken, clutching his wallet, his mind unraveling. For the first time in years, guilt cut through his armor of wealth. Before we dive deeper into the story, tell me, where are you listening from? And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something truly special waiting for you. That night he couldn't sleep. The girl's words echoed in his mind. "You looked kind." But he wasn't kind. Not anymore. The next morning, Richard returned to that same alley. No police. No sign of the kids. Just a discarded piece of cardboard where the boy had slept, scribbled with crayon letters. "From Malik's medicine. Please help." Something inside Richard Hale, the man who measured life by profit margins, cracked open. He made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, Richard Hale sat in the back of his black Bentley, staring at the piece of cardboard on his lap. "From Malik's medicine. Please help." He had the resources to feed an entire city. Yet somehow, 2 starving children had been invisible to him. He gripped the edge of the sign tighter. "Find them," he told his driver, Michael. "The girl and the boy who sleep in that alley. I don't care what it takes." Michael hesitated. "Sir, there are thousands of homeless families downtown. You sure you want to get involved?" Richard's eyes hardened. "I'm sure." Hours turned into days. Richard poured money, connections, and manpower into the search, asking street vendors, shelters, even local cops. But no trace, until one night, a janitor from a nearby pharmacy approached him. "I've seen them," the man said quietly. "The girl comes every few nights, tries to steal medicine for her brother." Richard's heart sank. Where? That night, he went alone. No bodyguards. No car. Just his umbrella, his guilt, and a mission. Rain fell again as he stood outside the old pharmacy. Through the window, he saw her, the same girl, her small hands trembling as she slipped a bottle of cough syrup into her pocket. Richard stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled. She froze. Their eyes met. "It's you," she whispered. "Yes," he said softly. "It's me." She bolted toward the door, but he caught her arm gently. "Wait, please." Her lip quivered. "I wasn't stealing. My brother's sick. He's got asthma and—" "I know," Richard said. "I just want to help." But before she could respond, a voice shouted from the back of the store. "Hey, what's going on here?" The store owner, a bulky man with a bitter face, stormed forward. "You again, thief," he snarled, grabbing her by the arm. Let her go. Richard snapped. The man turned, recognition flashing in his eyes. Mr. Hale, you know this girl. Richard's jaw tightened. Yes, she's with me. The store owner released her instantly. The girl looked at Richard, confused, wary, but desperate. Outside, she hesitated. Why are you helping me? Because no one helped me when I needed it most, Richard said quietly. Her eyes softened. For the first time, she told him her name. I'm Aisha. My brother's Malik. Richard drove them to a nearby diner, their first real meal in weeks. As Malik devoured pancakes, Richard couldn't stop watching them. Their hunger, their quiet bond, the way Aisha guarded her brother like a soldier protecting a kingdom. He leaned in. Aisha, where are your parents? She froze. Gone, she whispered. Our mom died last year. Dad went to find work. Never came back. Richard felt something break inside. He looked at Malik's inhaler, cracked and nearly empty, and realized the boy had been surviving on borrowed breaths. Let me help, Richard said. I can get you a doctor, food, somewhere to stay. But before he could finish, Aisha's expression changed. Fear, distrust. You just want to take us away, she said. That's what they always say. And then we disappear. Richard frowned. What are you talking about? She looked down. A man came before. Said he'd help. He took my friend's little sister. We never saw her again. The words chilled him. That night, Richard decided to prove his intentions. He took them to his penthouse, a place built for comfort, but never for warmth. Malik laughed as he ran through the marble halls. But Aisha stood by the window, staring at the city lights. You live up here while we live out there, she said quietly. Do you even know what it's like to be hungry? Her words hit harder than she knew. Richard looked away. I used to. Aisha frowned. You. He nodded. I wasn't born rich. My father worked in a factory. My mother cleaned offices. I made my first million trying to prove I'd never be poor again. But in the process, I became someone I don't even recognize. Aisha studied him, her defenses lowering just slightly. Then came the knock on the door. Michael stepped in, his face tight. Sir, there's something you need to know. Richard turned. What is it? Michael hesitated. The police, they're investigating a series of thefts. That girl, Aisha, she's wanted. They think she's part of a ring. Aisha's eyes widened in terror. That's not true. I only stole food. Please, you have to believe me. Richard looked between them, torn between his loyalty to the truth and the trust he'd just begun to build. He whispered, Aisha, what aren't you telling me? Tears filled her eyes. There's someone else. Someone who made me do it. If I didn't steal, he said Malik would get hurt. Richard's blood ran cold. Who? Aisha swallowed. His name's Damon. He runs a shelter on 5th Street. He pretends to help kids, but he makes them steal. Richard's face hardened. Then we end this. Tonight. But he didn't know. Damon wasn't just another criminal. He was someone from Richard's past. Someone who once saved his life and was about to betray him all over again. Now, everything Richard thought he knew about kindness, justice, and redemption was about to be tested. That night, Richard drove through the storm with Aisha and Malik asleep in the back seat, their small faces lit by the glow of the city. The address Aisha had given him, the shelter, sat at the edge of downtown. A flickering sign read 5th Street Outreach. Inside, the lights were dim. The smell of damp concrete and disinfectant filled the air. Then a voice, smooth, calm, familiar. Well, Richard Hale. Didn't expect to see you here. Richard froze. From the shadows stepped Damon Briggs, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a cheap leather coat, but his eyes sharp and calculating. Damon? Richard's voice dropped. You run this place? Run it? I built it, Damon said with a grin. Kids like her? They survive because of me. Aisha hid behind Richard, trembling. You call this survival? Richard snapped. You're using them. You've turned this place into a trap. Damon's smirk faded. You think you're any better? You made your billions off people who lost their homes. remember? Don't lecture me about morality." Richard's face went pale. "You were supposed to help me start over," Damon continued. "When the deal went south 10 years ago, you left me to rot. I built my own empire, just a different kind." A tense silence filled the room. Rain battered the roof like applause for the devil himself. Richard stepped forward. "You're hurting children, Damon." "And you're pretending to save them," Damon said, voice rising. "Same game, different mask." He turned to Aisha. "Tell him what happens if you disobey me, sweetheart." Aisha flinched. Her voice broke. He said he'd take Malik. Richard clenched his fists. "Not anymore." In one swift motion, Damon pulled a switchblade from his pocket. "You think you can just walk out of here with my property?" "Property?" Richard growled. "They're children." A struggle broke out, brutal and desperate. Damon lunged. Richard blocked the blade with his arm, the metal slicing through his sleeve. Aisha screamed. Malik woke up crying. Then, the sound of sirens cut through the chaos. Michael burst through the door, followed by 2 police officers. "Drop the knife!" one shouted. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Damon's eyes darted around. Then, in a reckless move, he grabbed Malik and held a knife to the boy's throat. Richard's world collapsed into one single truth. He couldn't fail again. "Damon," Richard said quietly, voice trembling, "you don't have to do this. You saved me once. Let me save you now." Damon's face softened just for a second. Then, in that split moment of hesitation, Richard lunged. The knife clattered to the ground. Officers tackled Damon to the floor. Malik was safe. Shaking, but safe. The boy looked up at Richard and whispered, "Are we going to be okay?" Richard exhaled, holding him close. "You already are." As Damon was led away in handcuffs, he spat. "You think this makes you a hero? You'll forget them in a week." Richard looked at him, not with anger, but sorrow. "Maybe once. Not anymore." A few days later, the storm had passed. Aisha and Malik sat in clean clothes in Richard's penthouse, staring at plates of warm food they didn't quite believe were real. "Eat," Richard smiled softly. "No one's taking it from you." Aisha hesitated. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." Richard leaned back, his voice low. "Because I spent years chasing money. But when I chased you, I finally caught something worth keeping." Tears welled in Aisha's eyes as she whispered, "Thank you." In that moment, Richard Hale, billionaire, loner, perfectionist, finally understood wealth wasn't about what you had. It was about who you lifted. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the same wallet she'd once taken. Inside, instead of cash, was a folded photo of Aisha, Malik, and him at the hospital that morning. He smiled. "I think it looks better like this." But just as calm settled in, a news alert flashed on the TV. Local philanthropist under investigation. Fifth Street outreach may have ties to larger trafficking ring. Fugitive suspect Damon Briggs escapes custody. Aisha's face went pale. "Richard," she whispered. "He's still out there." Richard turned off the TV. His jaw tightened. "Then this time," he said, standing, "we'll be ready." Months passed. The city looked different now. Not because the skyline had changed, but because Richard Hale had. The once cold billionaire now spent his mornings not in boardrooms, but in classrooms, funding literacy programs, food drives, and shelters under a new name, the Aisha Foundation. Every week, he visited the same downtown community center, once Damon's den of exploitation, now reborn into a safe haven filled with laughter, hope, and color. Aisha was there, painting a mural of bright sunflowers across the wall. Malik ran circles around the tables, clutching a soccer ball twice the size. Michael entered with a smile. "Hard to believe this was the same place," he said. Richard nodded, watching the children play. "It's amazing what happens when people finally see what they've been blind to." Aisha looked up from her brushwork. "Mr. Hale," she said softly, "you didn't just save us. You changed everything." Richard smiled faintly. "No, Aisha, you changed me." Just as warmth filled the air, a small envelope was slipped under the center's front door. Michael picked it up. "Looks like mail for you." Richard unfolded it. A simple note inside, written in shaky handwriting. Debts never stay buried forever. I'm not done. D. The world seemed to still for a heartbeat. Michael's jaw tightened. Damon's alive? Richard stared at the letter, his reflection flickering in the ink. He tucked it into his pocket slowly. Maybe, he said quietly. But I've learned something. When darkness comes back, the only thing you can do is shine brighter. He turned toward the kids. Their laughter filled the air, light and pure. Let's get back to work, he said. We've got more lives to change. And as the camera life pulled back, the image froze. Richard standing amid children's laughter, the storm clouds parting over the city skyline. A man no longer running from guilt, but walking toward grace. Stories like this remind us that extraordinary kindness often begins where judgment ends. One act of compassion can rewrite another person's entire life, and sometimes even save our own souls in the process. If this story touched your heart, please like this video. It helps more people discover these powerful tales of hope and redemption. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were Richard that day? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of kindness, justice, and second chances. Because you never know, the person who tests your patience today might just be the reason you rediscover your humanity tomorrow. Now tell me, if life handed you the chance to forgive someone who once hurt you, would you take it?